The last thing Jonathan Wells remembered before everything faded into darkness was the sound of screeching tires and a blinding flash of light. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening in Boston, Massachusetts, a chilly autumn night in October 2019, when his life took an unexpected turn. A car accident, swift, violent, and irreversible, thrust him into an experience that would change his existence forever. When Jonathan regained consciousness, he found himself in a place that defied explanation. The world around him was bathed in a radiant glow, a light that did not hurt his eyes but instead embraced him with warmth and peace. The colors were unlike anything he had ever seen, brighter, richer, and pulsating with life. It was as if every hue carried its own melody, a symphony of vibrancy that resonated deep within his soul. Then, he saw her. Standing before him was his grandmother, Margaret Wells, who had passed away nearly 15 years earlier. She looked younger than he remembered, glowing with a beauty that transcended age. Her eyes, filled with an indescribable love, met his with a knowing gaze. "Jonathan," she spoke, her voice carrying a harmony that seemed to blend with the very fabric of this ethereal place. "You cannot stay here. Your time has not yet come." Confusion and awe battled within him. How could this be real? Was he dreaming? But as he looked around, the overwhelming sense of peace and belonging told him that this was no illusion. His grandmother took a step closer, reaching out to touch his hand. The moment their skin met, an immense wave of understanding washed over him. It was as if 1,000 truths had been whispered into his soul in an instant. Love, boundless and pure, was the essence of this place. There was no pain, no sorrow, only the fullness of divine presence. Margaret's expression grew serious, yet still filled with tenderness. "There is a mission for you," she said softly. "You must bring as many souls as possible with you when your true time comes." Jonathan's heart pounded. What did she mean? Before he could speak, a presence far greater than anything he had ever known made itself known. He turned, and there, standing in a radiant brilliance, was Jesus. The mere sight of him was overwhelming. The love emanating from him was so powerful that it made Jonathan feel as though every fiber of his being was simultaneously being unraveled and put back together. There was no judgment in his gaze, only an understanding beyond words. At that moment, knowledge poured into Jonathan's soul, not through speech, but through something deeper. He suddenly understood the purpose of life, the weight of every action, and the reality of eternity. It was not about religious rituals or rigid doctrines. It was about love, the kind that transforms and redeems. He felt no fear, no hesitation. For the first time in his life, Jonathan understood what it meant to truly be home. But then, just as suddenly as he had arrived, a force began pulling him away. A deep longing surged through him. He did not want to leave. Yet as he looked at Jesus, there was no sadness in his expression, only reassurance. "You will return," Jesus conveyed to him, without words yet, with complete clarity. "There is still work for you to do." The light around Jonathan began to dim, and he felt himself being drawn backward. His grandmother's loving face was the last thing he saw before everything faded once more. Then, pain. The sound of voices. A sharp gasp for air. Jonathan Wells was back. He had returned to the world, but he was no longer the same man. The beeping of medical monitors was the first thing Jonathan Wells registered as he drifted back into consciousness. His body ached in ways he had never known before. Every breath a struggle, every movement heavy with pain. The sterile scent of the hospital room filled his nostrils, and as his vision adjusted to the dim light, he saw his mother, Linda Wells, asleep in a chair beside his bed, her face marked with exhaustion and worry. It took a moment for the memories to flood back, not of the accident, but of what had happened afterward. The light, his grandmother, the overwhelming presence of Jesus, and the divine mission entrusted to him. The weight of it pressed against his chest, heavier than the pain from his injuries. A nurse entered the room, noticing his movement. "You're awake," she said with relief. "You've been unconscious for nearly 2 days. You were in a serious accident, but you're incredibly lucky to be alive." Lucky. Jonathan knew better. It wasn't luck that had brought him back. It was purpose. As soon as his mother woke up and saw his eyes open, tears streamed down her face. "Oh, Jonathan," she sobbed, gripping his hand tightly. "We thought we lost you." He squeezed her fingers gently, feeling the warmth of her touch in a way he had never appreciated before. Everything felt different. The room, the people around him, even time itself, it all seemed more fragile, more precious. But something inside him had changed, something he struggled to put into words. In the following days, as he recovered, doctors and nurses marveled at how well he was healing. They spoke of the severity of his injuries, how he should have suffered far worse consequences, yet he was improving at an inexplicable rate. To them, it was an anomaly. To Jonathan, it was confirmation. At night, when the hospital was quiet, he would close his eyes and try to grasp what he had seen. The beauty of heaven, the way everything pulsed with life and love, the colors that existed beyond the spectrum of human sight, the music that was more than sound. It was a force, a living presence that wrapped around his soul. And then there was the mission. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. "You must bring as many souls as possible with you when your true time comes." But how? What was he supposed to do? He was just a man, an ordinary person, yet he had been given an extraordinary responsibility. One evening, as he stared at the ceiling, lost in thought, the door to his hospital room creaked open. It was his best friend, Michael Carter, a man who had never been particularly religious but had always been loyal. Michael stepped inside hesitantly, relief evident in his eyes. "Dude," Michael exhaled, pulling up a chair, "you scared the hell out of all of us." Jonathan smiled faintly. "I scared myself." Michael studied him for a moment, then shook his head. "You look different. I mean, I know you just went through a crazy experience, but it's more than that. It's like you're seeing things differently." Jonathan hesitated, debating whether he should tell him. Would Michael even believe him? But then he remembered Jesus' words. "There is still work for you to do." Taking a deep breath, Jonathan decided to begin. "Mike, I need to tell you what happened to me, and I need you to listen with an open mind." And so, for the first time, Jonathan shared his story. As he spoke, Michael's expression shifted from skepticism to awe, then to something else, something almost fearful. "You're saying you saw heaven?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan nodded. "Not just saw it, I lived it, and I was sent back with a mission." Michael let out a long breath, rubbing his face. "Man, this is crazy. But the way you're talking, I don't know. I believe you." Jonathan felt something shift in that moment. This was the beginning. He had no idea where this path would take him, but one thing was clear. He could never live the way he had before. Something far greater than himself had been set in motion, and there was no turning back. As the weeks passed, and Jonathan's physical health continued to improve, the reality of his newfound mission began to weigh heavily on him. Each day, he was more acutely aware of the purpose that had been thrust upon him. It wasn't a vague sense of destiny. It was a call, a clear and undeniable responsibility that could no longer be ignored. He spent countless hours reflecting on his time in heaven, trying to absorb every detail, every piece of wisdom that had been imparted to him. The experience of standing in the presence of Jesus, feeling the boundless love that emanated from him, and understanding the intricate workings of the universe, All of it had opened his eyes to the fragility and the sacredness of human life. The beauty of heaven was unlike anything he could describe. The colors, the light, the essence of everything, all living and breathing in perfect harmony. There was no decay, no imperfection. Heaven was, in every sense, a place of pure perfection. Yet, Jonathan understood that his time on earth was not just about experiencing that beauty, but about sharing it with others. He knew now, with absolute certainty, that the decisions people made during their lives on earth had eternal consequences. Heaven, with all its splendor, wasn't a place that was automatically granted. It was a destination that required choices, sacrifices, and above all, a deep connection with Jesus. And that was his mission, to lead others to that connection. Jonathan began to speak with those around him, friends, family, even strangers, about what he had witnessed. He shared the story of his near-death experience, detailing the love of God, the beauty of heaven, and the importance of a relationship with Jesus. Many of them listened, some skeptically, others in awe. One afternoon, while he was sitting in a local cafe, a familiar face walked in. It was Sophia Reed, a college acquaintance who had once been a devout Christian but had lost her faith after a series of personal tragedies. Her face, once bright with the joy of belief, now seemed clouded with doubt. Jonathan had always admired her intellect and spirit, but he had noticed the change in her over the years. "Sophia," he greeted her warmly, motioning to the seat across from him. "I didn't expect to see you here." Sophia smiled faintly, her eyes still heavy with grief. "Yeah, well, life's been a bit of a mess lately." Jonathan could feel the weight of her sadness, and it reminded him of the darkness he had once felt before his experience in heaven. He decided now was the time to share what had happened to him. "Sophia, I've been through something incredible. Something that changed everything for me." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "I had a near-death experience. I was in a coma for days, and during that time Well, I was taken to heaven." Jonathan paused, watching her closely for any sign of disbelief, but she simply nodded. He could tell she wasn't quick to dismiss him, but the skepticism was there. He continued, "I saw things, Sophia. I saw God's love in a way that was beyond anything I could imagine. It was so powerful, so overwhelming. And I came back with a message. We're not just here to live day to day. We're here with purpose. Heaven is real, and our time here on earth is not just about surviving. It's about the choices we make, the relationships we form, and the love we share. And the most important decision is to accept Jesus and what he did for us." Sophia was silent for a long moment, absorbing his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but full of emotion. "Jonathan, I don't know what to say. I've struggled with my faith. I've seen too much pain, too much loss. It's hard to believe in something when everything feels so broken." Jonathan understood. He had once felt the same way, believing that the suffering of the world was too great for a loving God to allow. But his time in heaven had given him clarity. "Sophia," he said gently, "I understand the pain you've been through. I've seen it too. But the love I felt in heaven was not just for the perfect, for those who have it all together. It was for everyone, the broken, the lost, the hurting. And that love, it's here for you too. No matter how far you feel you've fallen, no matter how deep the pain, God is still there. He still wants you to know that he loves you, and he's waiting for you to reach out to him." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them away quickly. "I want to believe. I really do. But it's hard to know where to start." Jonathan smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. "You've already started. Just take a moment to talk to God. Ask him to show you his love, his truth, and if you're ready, he's there waiting." Their conversation continued, and by the end of it, Sophia's heart had softened. the walls she had built around her faith beginning to crack. She wasn't ready to make a decision yet, but she had heard his message. As she left, Jonathan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what he was meant to do, share the love and grace that had been shown to him in heaven. His life had been given back to him for a reason, and he was determined to fulfill that purpose. And so, Jonathan's journey continued, each step bringing him closer to the mission he had been sent to accomplish. He knew there would be many more conversations, many more moments of doubt and struggle, but he also knew that God's love was bigger than any fear or resistance. It was a love that could transform lives, if only people would open their hearts to it. The mission had begun. Jonathan's mission continued to grow as he found himself speaking to more people, sharing his experiences with an urgency he had never known before. It wasn't just about his own transformation anymore. It was about the eternal transformation that awaited anyone willing to listen. He knew that the world was filled with people who were lost, broken, or searching for something they couldn't quite name, and he felt a profound responsibility to reach them. One evening, as he was preparing dinner at his modest apartment in San Diego, his phone rang. It was Lily, his younger sister. She had always been close to him, but the years since his coma had revealed a growing distance between them. They spoke less frequently, and he had noticed a shift in her demeanor, one of uncertainty and doubt. Jonathan had always been protective of Lily, wanting to shield her from pain, but he knew the time had come to reach out to her in a way he never had before. "Hey, Jonathan," she said when he picked up the phone. There was a noticeable hesitance in her voice. "Hey, Lily, how's everything?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation light. There was a long pause before she replied. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about you and what you've been through." Her voice faltered. "I just don't know what to think about it all, Jonathan. You talk about heaven like you've been there, like you've seen things no one else could imagine. And honestly, it scares me. What if it's not real? What if it's just something your mind came up with because of all that you went through?" Jonathan took a deep breath. He knew this moment would come, but the weight of it still hit him hard. His sister, whom he had always been able to rely on, was struggling with the very faith that had sustained him. He knew that this conversation was not going to be easy, but it was a conversation that needed to happen. "I understand, Lily," he said softly. "I know it sounds impossible, trust me, I didn't ask for this experience, but I can tell you without a doubt that what I saw, what I felt in heaven, was real. More real than anything I've ever experienced on earth. Heaven isn't just some distant hope. It's a reality that is beyond what we can comprehend. And the love I felt there, it's a love that God is offering to each one of us." There was silence on the other end of the line, and Jonathan could hear the faint sound of Lily's breathing, as if she were trying to absorb his words. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "What if I don't know how to believe anymore? What if I've been too hurt to even try?" Jonathan's heart ached at her words. He understood that pain. He had felt it too. But now, with the clarity of his experience, he could offer something more than just sympathy. He could offer hope. "Lily," he said gently, "believing doesn't mean having all the answers. It doesn't mean you have to fix everything or be perfect. It means reaching out to God, even in the midst of your pain, even in your doubt. I know it's hard. I know it feels impossible sometimes. But the love that's waiting for you, it's not about what you've done or haven't done. It's about who God is and how much He wants you to experience His love, just like I did." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes as she listened to her brother's words. For the first time in what felt like years, something inside of her began to shift. Maybe, just maybe, she could believe again. "How do I even start?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan smiled, feeling a wave of peace settle over him. "You start by talking to Him. Just talk to God. Tell Him how you feel, even if it's anger or confusion. He's not afraid of those emotions. And ask him to show you his love, his truth. Take it one step at a time, Lily. I'll be here, praying for you, every step of the way. For the next few months, Jonathan's life took on an even deeper sense of purpose. He spent time with his sister, guiding her as she navigated the path back to faith. He continued to meet with others, sharing his story and offering the same love and compassion that had been shown to him. Each conversation, each relationship, felt like a precious opportunity to make an eternal difference. One evening, as Jonathan stood on a quiet hill overlooking the city, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. He thought about the pain he had endured, the uncertainty he had felt, and how all of it had led him to this moment, this mission that was now his life. In the distance, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the landscape. As the light faded, Jonathan felt the deep peace that had become a constant presence in his life. He knew that whatever came next, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. His journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, but Jonathan was no longer afraid. He understood now that life was not about the destination, but about the eternal impact of the choices he made along the way. And most importantly, he knew that God's love, more immense, more powerful, and more transformative than anything he had ever imagined, was always waiting for anyone willing to receive it. And that, Jonathan realized, was the message that he was meant to share with the world. The mission had taken root.